So use the application button to get access to the detail families, and then we'll be creating a new family, and then we'll come down to the metric generic detail. Let's find it, metric generic detail item. There's two types of detail. There's a line-based one, which is a repeating detail, and then we've got this metric generic detail. Okay, so you don't want that one, you want this one. So open, and all we get is a couple of reference planes, our family environment, which again we'll start to get a little bit more familiar with. Create, so we can create 2D shapes this time. We haven't got 3D options, we've just got 2D options here. We can bring in other detail components. Again, they will be 2D based. So this is more about the annotation. You can create reference planes and reference lines, and we can create all sorts of adaptive and parametric actions within this family, but we're going to keep it nice and simple. Now what we're going to do is bring in the CAD files, and we're going to make that detail. We'll leave a few gaps for the glazing to go in, so we'll draw some lines in Revit, because there are certain elements that we want to just sort of put in later on, but this is the process for building it. Now this intersection point between these two reference planes, that's the insertion point. Okay, so wherever you want the insertion point on your detail to be, then it's referenced by the intersection between that plane which is pinned and this one which is pinned. So this is center front to back, and this is center left to right. So we are going to go insert, and we're going to import a CAD file. Now the files that you're looking for will be on the student shared W drive. I'm picking them off my own computer, but you'll go to the W drive or copy them from there onto a flash stick and load them up from that. So what we are looking for are the intermediate section to start off with. The intermediate section is just a block basically that's been generated from that curtain wall profiles drawing. So I've split them all up into top. We've also got a suspended ceiling bulkhead that I've created as well. So go to intermediate section, not the curtain wall profiles, because that's got all of them in there. This one we want. And I've noticed when doing this before that auto detect tends not to work. So if you do know the units, it's always better to put them in so you get the accurate sort of scaling. And then positioning auto origin to origin, that will do. Place the reference level, that's also fine. Correct lines are slightly off axis, we can do that with this, and say open, and then allow that to come in. So that's come in from the origin point of the drawing, which was there, to the origin point of this environment, which is also there. Now I'll just turn thin lines on, and we've got this border which we can't do anything about. The other thing that we need to be careful of is our selection setting. Sometimes you can't select these things. Underneath the modify bit, we've got these select options. So select links, which are all referencing these sorts of things down here. Select links, select under elements, and select pinned elements. If that was turned off, then I wouldn't be able to select it. Okay, so we've got to make sure that we can turn these things on. And then if we want to start deleting various objects in here, we'd have to explode this as well. So though it is a bit annoying, this big border, if I did unpin it, then that sort of slightly goes away. And if I did explode it, so I'll select it and explode or partially explode it, then it goes away altogether. So maybe for the purposes of this, it's never a good idea to explode, but we do break down the lines to the various bits, and I can then start deleting some elements. So I want to keep this thing, and what I'm going to end up doing is using on the create tab this filled region, which is going to create me these shapes. So if I click on filled region, then I get this option here, and I'm going to use the pick lines tool and then pick these various lines. Now we have got some small curves, so again it's not always going to produce the exact detail that we want, but it'll certainly be good enough for our family. So the filled region is going to be made up of these bits. I've deleted that end line. I'm going to use this option, and if I hover over these things and tap the tab key, then it's going to start selecting chained elements. Okay, so that'll do to start with. I'm not going to lock these things out because A, it's going to take too long, and B, it's unnecessary for the purposes of this, because we're not going to lock to anything. We're just going to pick up the profile. And what I've also got to be careful of is when I use the tab key, I don't sort of reselect lines that I've already selected. So sometimes it's better to tab in away from it and just pick up sort of bits and pieces. And we're not going to pick these lines up because they're too small. Can't create a line because it's too small a line. So we just have to make sure that we go over that one. And we need to come around to this bit and come up like so. So again, this is I'm going to speed up this process when I sort of produce it. So I'll see you when I have finished selecting all of these outlines in a short while. Okay, so I've gone round the perimeter of this outside bit, and I'll just hit the tick, finish editing. So what I've basically created now is difficult to see because my filled region is actually concrete. If I, with this filled region selected, if I go down and say it's going to be solid fill black, then we'll have a better idea of what I've actually created. What I'm also going to do is create a filled region which is not going to be black. So if I just select this filled region now, I'll sort that out first. So edit type and duplicate it. All I'm doing is putting a hatch pattern in here, and I'll call it solid fill grey. And OK to that, and then change the black to maybe this light grey or this dark one. I'll probably have the lighter one, and say OK to that, and then OK to that. And so this has got a lighter grey finish to it. So what I'm going to do now is just move this out of the way for a second, and then I can sort out the inner bit. So I'm going to do a similar thing with the inner bit. So again, it's create, and again it's going to be a filled region, and I'll turn that on to solid fill grey to start off with, and I'll use this pick lines tool, hover and tab, and I've picked up a few more this time. So that's that bit done, and I'll say OK to that. So I've got that bit. Now I can move this to this bit and cut one out of the other. Now I'm making a little bit of a meal of this, but I want to show you some of the things you can do. So I'm going to edit this outer shape by cutting this inner shape from it, but I can't use the cut tool. So I just select the outer shape and edit boundary, and then use this pick lines tool and hover over that and hit the tab key. That should pick up all of it, chain of walls, and then say OK, and that basically then just cuts one out from the other. So I've now got this shape, which is what I was looking for all along. Okay, so it is quite a little process that you have to do, but once you've done it, it's done. And so what I'm going to do is just sort of create this bit and some of these other bits, and then we'll have them all ready to use in our detail. Okay, so I'm just going to fast forward to the final section, otherwise it's going to take far too long and be far too painful to watch. But this is ultimately what we are trying to end up with. Now what I said earlier was that we could have just filled all these bits in AutoCAD with a hatch, and then that would pretty much sorted us out. And what we could then do was convert the lines. So these lines could be converted from model-based lines to actual detail lines. Okay, so we've got those options available to us as well. So we're now going to fast forward to the finished version of this so that we can then load it into our model. So here we are, our curtain wall profile intermediate. It's an RFA, which is a Revit family file. We'll be loading this into our project, but just a quick run through of what we've done. So that basic technique for the outer bit, I've done it for all the other bits, so this inner bit and then these screw heads. And this is a group of lines, and I've got one piece there and another piece here. It allows a little bit of flexibility in so much as sometimes you'd have different end caps and sometimes you'd have sort of different lengths of these things, so it allows me then to sort of stretch these out individually should I want to create a different type of family. But ultimately it's all combined together in this family, and then this will get loaded into the project. So if you've got access to the curtain wall profile intermediate, .rfa, then we shall load into the project, and it's going to be the details project, not the family, and we say OK to that, and then this comes in as the family element. Okay, so I'll just hit escape for the second. Now it is loaded in. Fear not, we will be able to get it back, and we'll be able to get it back either by going down to our project browser and down to the families, and then we go to detail items and curtain wall profile intermediate. There it is, and then we click and drag this into the drawing, and then we've got it back. Alternatively, if we go to our annotate tab and we click on component, then it's going to launch the last 2D component that we had as well. Now what I did say we need to do first of all though is to flip this curtain wall system, because it's not in the right orientation. So we can't do it in this view, so we'd have to go back to the level 0 floor plan. That would do it. With the curtain wall selected, just make sure you select the dashed line that makes up the curtain wall, so you might have to just tab in a few times just to pick it up. So that one there, that's what we're looking for, and then we flip it the other side, and then we can go back to our section. So it's our call out 1 or 2, I think it's probably call out 1. There you go, so our curtain wall system is now flipped. We've got a couple of other things that we need to do, so we either move this out or we move these back. Now we'll probably move these back. So again, I can click on this and right click, select all instances in entire project, because they're only on this front row, and I want to make sure that the ones I can't see are selected as well, and then we'll move them from this position to this position. Okay, so we just moved them back a little bit just to take up the difference in the flipping of this. Now we could have moved this out, but we'll leave that as it is. So it allows you flexibility throughout the model to adjust these sorts of things. So with our annotate tab and our component, if we just hit this button here, this is going to bring in that family because it was the last one. Otherwise, we click on this drop down and choose it from a selection of detail families that we've got, but it's the one that sits right at the top of the stack. And I want to use my spacebar to orientate it to the correct position, and then I can position it midpoint to midpoint on this, or pick that point there. That seems to have got it, and then I can come down and place it at this point as well. So then hit escape, and this has positioned this. Now again, we could do some slight adjustments later on, but for the purposes of this, this is how we bring in these details. So we're looking at something a lot more detailed in this drawing now, and you could probably go down to a 1 to 5 sort of level of detail as well. Again, it doesn't do much apart from tighten up these drafting hatch patterns, but again, you get the idea of what's going on here. So because our glass is going to run into this direction and our curtain panel is going to come in to this bit, we need to hide our curtain wall system. So if we just right click on our curtain wall and we choose hide in view, and that's category because we want all the curtain wall bits to be hidden, then that's going to hide our curtain wall. Okay, so it's not like we've got rid of it or deleted it. We don't want to do that because it's needed in lots of other views, but for the detail view it's just not quite up to scratch. So hide in view category, that takes all the curtain wall elements out of the picture and allows us to concentrate on the detail elements. So now we need to put the glass in. That's just a question of, on the annotate tab, we use this detail line tool, and might as well use the rectangle tool, it might save a little bit of time. So I'm going to click there and just take it out of the drawing. Just 10 mil will be fine, and click down there and take that in to about 10 there. And then when we got those in, we can use the align tool. So align from there to there, and from there to there. And then we'll do the same thing at the bottom bit. So again, annotate, If we use the model line, then this looks for a reference plane. Okay, so we don't want that. We want to use the detail line. So on the annotate tab, the detail line doesn't ask for a reference plane because we're drawing in a 2D environment anyway. And again, the rectangle tool, I'll just come in. It's much easier to kind of just go in a little bit over to start off with. I'm going to try and keep that to 10 mil, and then we'll come in that point and come down to there. A little bit tricky sometimes, but just get them in first, and then you can use the align tool. So we want to align there and that, and there and that. So that's got those bits sorted out. Then we've got our central sort of panel. So for that we could use a region. So we can use a filled region for that as well. And again, the rectangle tool, the filled region will have diagonal crosshatch. That will be fine for the moment. And we want to pick sort of that point to this point down here. Just track along. It doesn't allow tracking, but there we'll go. And instead of invisible lines, we want probably to have medium lines. And let's see what the fill pattern gives us. So that doesn't give us our, now that has not given us our edge that we wanted. So just select it again, edit boundary, tab in to pick up all our lines, and change this back to medium lines, and then say OK. So there we got the medium line that we can see. That's a bit better. Now as for the fill, again, you won't want a slightly different fill. I don't really like that one, so we'll choose, let's try the diagonal up. That's still a bit weak, but we could try tightening up a little bit later. The process would be to just edit type and duplicate. We'll leave it as diagonal up 2 and say OK. And the diagonal up 3 mil drafting. Click on the little ellipsis symbol, and we'll have maybe 1.5 or 0.5, and OK to that, and OK to that, and then that's given us a much tighter looking hatch, so it looks more like a fill panel. Okay, so it's all sort of coming together. Now we've got another instance whereby we want to put in the much more detailed suspended ceiling. It wouldn't just kind of float in mid-air. It's going to have to be fixed by a load of brackets, and next time you walk into a building which has a suspended ceiling system, you can see parts of the detail. Just have a look at it. There's lots and lots of bits of track and cabling going on to hold the grid up, and the way it interacts with this curtain wall system is going to be crucial to our system as well. The important thing, however, is that the height of the suspended ceiling system is correct. So you would define that in the model, and then when you come to the detail, you can sort of make sure it all lines through. So I've already created a suspended ceiling family based on a very similar technique to this. I went on to a suspended ceiling company's website. I can't remember offhand who it was, and got one of their freely available CAD files, brought it into the family environment, and now we can load it into this detail. So we can go to the component and load family, and then we'll just look for, it's this one here, the suspended ceiling bulkhead, RFA. So we can click on that and open, and then this will come in looking something like this. So that's going to line up. The suspended ceiling system is going to, let's just put it in and hit escape a couple of times. So this is our detail, and our ceiling needs to come up a little bit as well, because this is going to fix to the underside, or it's going to line through with this. It's going to be fixed to the steel and hang off these various bits and pieces. So this hangs off some structure, and then everything else that sort of gets supported by it, by a series of screws and bolts and wires, etc. So this thing we want to align to the underside of that. So select this and click on the move tool. Make sure we constrain, and then we can bring this in sort of along here to about that point there. So that's all fixed back to that. And then this needs to be adjusted ever so slightly. So we've got a distance of 9 millimeters from there. So we can select our suspended ceiling, and height offset from level, instead of 3200, can be 3209. And the important thing, even though we're going to hide this suspended ceiling, is that we get all the heights right to match up with our detail. There's no point in having the sort of general model and the details being completely disassociated. We need to make sure that all the general stuff works as far as the details go, and what we do in this 2D drawing is just to add more information to the drawing. So now we can select our suspended ceiling, right click, hide in view and element. That will get rid of that. We can probably bring this edge in a little bit more because we don't need to extend it much further than that. Bring that down a bit, bring this up a bit, and then on our annotate tab, detail lines, and we can just extend these off to the edge like so. And we'll probably put an extra line in there, take that off to there. We've also got some of these things, so we might as well add these bits in as well. So again, detail line, and again we'll use the rectangle tool, and I'll create a rectangle from this one like so. And then I can select that and use the array, and we've probably got about 15 or 20 of them. We'll move to second, and we'll say we've got 20. If we group and associate for now, then it means that we can adjust that later on. So if I zoom in a bit and pick this point and copy it to that point, so basically this is my move to second from there to here, and then that's going to array that, and that's taking it down there, so I don't need 20. 15 probably be sufficient. So that's making this look uniform, and we can do a similar thing with these circles, possibly that if you wanted to as well, but we'll just go detail line and create a circle. If we can't snap to the midpoint of this or the center of the circle, SC for center circle, and that will pick up the snap, and then we've got that shape drawn. We select it, we can use the array, and we can go from this point here, the center of this one. So again, SC from there to there, and this time we'll have, say, 10, and that's taking it just off out of the way. Okay, so again, we're using basic techniques within Revit to just add a little bit more interest to these things. So we'll just turn our line thickness back on so we can make sure that everything looks about right. So everything's okay there. You might want to start changing the line thicknesses, but again, for the purposes of this instruction, it's just to get you to appreciate what sorts of things you can do inside of Revit. So now we've got this call out showing us much more detail what's going on in this situation. Now you can then put in the screed on the upper deck, on the floor if you wanted to, and any more information you've got down here, some duct systems, etc. Some ventilation maybe that coming around here, or the bolts onto this thing, so you can turn it into a very nice looking detail in the end. But for the purposes of this, I'm finished with the drawing part of it. We'll just have a look at adding some notation, dimensions, and tagging. Okay, and we'll do that in the next little video.